Hello, I'm William Dunkerley, author of The Phony Litvinenko Murder. This video supplements Chapter 12 of that book, called The Deathbed Accusation, Something's Fishy Here. In November 2006, on the verge of death, reputed former KGB spy Alexander Litvinenko issued an accusation that rocked the world. He reportedly accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of poisoning him. As a consequence of that one man's utterance, relations between Russia and Great Britain plummeted to Cold War levels. Diplomats were expelled, and things went downhill from there. In the United States, threatening rhetoric escalated over the issue, and Congress passed a resolution to express its outrage. All that happened despite the absence of any evidence to support the well-reported deathbed statement. It seems that the entire story was concocted in the media and has no factual basis. Indeed, the deathbed statement has become a media-inspired fable. In the so-called deathbed statement, Litvinenko eloquently accused Putin of poisoning him. He did that only hours before lapsing into a coma, at a time when he was so weak he could hardly move his head, and amid reports that he could hardly speak at all. He made his impeccably formulated accusation in the English language. That was quite an accomplishment, since he never before had achieved proficiency in speaking even simple sentences in the language. Then suddenly the media's story changed. Now Litvinenko hadn't dictated the statement after all. It was written by a man named Goldfarb, although, claimed Goldfarb, Litvinenko said he agreed with every word of it after it had been read back to him in English and Russian. And then Litvinenko signed and dated the statement. He did that despite reports that he could hardly move, and just hours before becoming comatose. Then, in another switcheroo, there were suddenly two versions of the statement, both conveying the same theme, but with different words. That leads to my simple technical analysis of this. There's something fishy here. Following Alexander Litvinenko's suspicious death on November 23rd, here's what the media were contending. According to the Associated Press, Goldfarb said Litvinenko had dictated the statement before he lost consciousness on Tuesday, November 21st. Goldfarb is Alexander Goldfarb, sometimes described as a Litvinenko family spokesperson and employee of Boris Berezovsky, a British tycoon originally from Russia. AP went on to say that Litvinenko signed the statement in the presence of Marina, his wife. On November 24th, BBC News reported that the statement had been read out by his friend Alex Goldfarb outside University College Hospital in London. The Washington Post chimed in, calling it a statement Litvinenko's family and friends said he dictated from his deathbed. And according to the Chicago Tribune, Goldfarb read this statement standing before a cluster of cameras and reporters. This was high drama. Here are a few of the things contained in the statement.
As I lie here, I can distinctly hear the beating of wings of the angel of death. I think, therefore, that this may be the time to say one or two things to the person responsible for my present condition. You may succeed in silencing one man, but the howl of protest from around the world will reverberate, Mr. Putin, in your ears for the rest of your life. May God forgive you for what you have done, not only to me, but to beloved Russia and its people.
What's wrong with this story? Well, for one thing, Litvinenko didn't speak English that well. Here's a clip of him fumbling to speak at the Frontline Club in London just weeks before he was poisoned.
My name is Alexander Litvinenko. I am former KGB and FSB officer. My speech is difficult for me. Can I use translator?
That's quite a departure from the eloquent English used in the so-called deathbed statement, isn't it? But there's still another perplexing question. While on the verge of death, could Litvinenko actually speak at all? On November 16th, KavkazCenter.com, a Chechen website, reported his condition suddenly, sharply deteriorated. He can't speak anymore. And on November 21st, the date written on the deathbed statement, the Daily Mail reported that he has difficulty speaking and can only talk in short, painful bursts. Again, that's a far cry from the fancy words and sentences used in the deathbed statement. Something's wrong here. This story just doesn't add up. The Washington Post just may have the answer to this mystery. According to their story of June 10th, 2007, Litvinenko didn't dictate that statement after all. They reported, Goldfarb said Litvinenko, on his deathbed, told him to write a note in good English to name Putin as the man behind the poisoning. Well, until now, Litvinenko had maintained it was an Italian named Mario Scaramella who poisoned him. But Goldfarb said he read his note to Litvinenko in English and Russian. Litvinenko thereupon said, I agree with every word of it, and signed it in the presence of his wife. Can you believe all that? I'm telling you, this media story is sounding more and more like a fable. Goldfarb wrote the deathbed statement. That's why the English was so flowery, and he captured perfectly the thoughts of Litvinenko, who was on the verge of unconsciousness. What's more, there was a witness to the signing, the wife, just in case anyone questioned the authenticity. That's the story? The Post had it right now? Mystery solved, right? Well, maybe not. You see, that Daily Mail report of November 21st also disclosed that Mr. Litvinenko can barely lift his head, so weak are his neck muscles. But the Goldfarb statement that Litvinenko signed appears to have been signed with a steady hand. How can the Washington Post and the Daily Mail reconcile that? Pardon my sarcasm, but what'll we hear from the media next? That somebody signed it for him? In my book, The Phony Litvinenko Murder, I liken the media's story about Litvinenko to Alice in Wonderland. They are both fantasy adventures filled with illogical nonsense, where one nonsensical thing morphs into another and into another. The latest morphing in the story involves the words themselves that Alexander Goldfarb wrote. A March 1st, 2012 story that appeared in the Telegraph features the famous deathbed statement, but now with different words. So first the statement's authorship changed, now the words themselves have changed. Look at these revisions. Goldfarb, I can distinctly hear the beating of the wings of the angel of death. Telegraph, I sense the distinct presence of the angel of death. Goldfarb, I may be able to give him the slip. Telegraph, it is still possible I'll be able to evade him. Goldfarb, you may succeed in silencing one man. Telegraph, you may be able to force me to stay quiet. So first the statement's authorship changed, now the words themselves have changed. I shared these curious differences with an experienced analyst, an expert on the Litvinenko case. She postulated that the writer of the Telegraph story must have gotten hold of a copy of a first draft or something. That seemed plausible until I noticed something else in the Telegraph story. A day or two before he slipped into a coma, Litvinenko dictated a statement that he asked to be released in the event of his death. Alex Goldfarb took it down, they said, so the Telegraph story maintains that Litvinenko actually dictated a statement. That flies in the face of all the refutations in the media of the original story. But the Telegraph also pegs the authorship of the dictated statement to a different date. Goldfarb wrote his statement on November 21st, the day on which Litvinenko became comatose. According to the Telegraph's timeline, Litvinenko would have dictated his statement on the 19th or 20th, well before Goldfarb went to work on his own statement. This deathbed story reached the point of absurdity some time ago. That's punctuated by this Telegraph story. It seems like flagrantly bad journalism. I think you get the overall point. These media reports don't add up. This is Alice in Wonderland stuff. And do you want to know the final topper? It's about Alexander Goldfarb, the guy who wrote Litvinenko's deathbed statement and accusation against Putin. On November 20th, the BBC reported Alex Goldfarb, who had been visiting Mr. Litvinenko in hospital and who has alleged Russian government involvement, admitted there was no direct evidence of that. So it was all just unfounded conjecture. The deathbed statement, by the way, whose idea was it? It was called for by a lawyer, according to a Radio Svoboda report. What's really going on here?